We have been listening to Bernie Sanders speaking there in Madison, Wisconsin. It was a barn burner of a speech on a night that has been very good for Bernie Sanders. Indeed, he spoke not only about his usual themes in that stump speech of economic inequality, of policing reform, of changing the political system. He also spoke about his victories. You see it there. While he was talking, we broke in earlier to call Washington State, the biggest delegate haul tonight. We called it for Bernie Sanders with a big 74%, and then Alaska. He won earlier tonight as well. The Democratic caucus there by 79%. I want to play for you the moment when Bernie Sanders essentially learned in real time on air that he had won the Washington State caucus, because he'd already begun speaking, as we were just showing you, in Wisconsin. And then Symone Sanders, one of his press aides, basically came out onto the stage. Take a look at this moment just moments ago.
You're ready for a news alert. We just won the state of Washington.
There you have it, Bernie Sanders. That was moments ago. Symone Sanders, his press aide, told his wife, who kind of came up to the stage and told him. I want to go right to Madison, Wisconsin, where we have John Nichols, national affairs correspondent for The Nation magazine, who's been following all this and was with Bernie Sanders in a reporter's gaggle just before that address. John, your thoughts on what we're seeing here in a state you know so well?
Well, Sanders came into the state today obviously looking for a place to have a victory party, hoping that he would get some good results and knowing that Madison would turn out well for him. The crowd was there, and the energy was incredibly high. Remember, Sanders has had lots of up and downs. He's had good nights and bad nights, but he had a very good one this night. And to be able to announce it in front of that massive cheering crowd, I think was, you could tell he was very upbeat, even as he was coming in. It's very interesting. You saw a side of him that I think folks don't always see. He was on his cell phone. He was asking about results and returns. Yeah. He really wanted to go up and declare that victory. As you saw, he went up a little bit before he was able to declare it. But then he got the announcement on stage, which probably gave you your best shot.
That's certainly true. And look, as you mentioned, he seemed very exuberant. He's had a very good day here with these first two states in lopsided caucus victories, putting delegates on the board, John. But he also, as we all know from the Larry David impression, is sometimes beloved or mocked for what people call a cranky nature. There wasn't a crankiness. There was, if anything, more of an excitement verging on a combativeness, which I think is different than being cranky. I want to play one other moment we saw where he was talking about Republican governors, and he really came out in a strong way and put it specifically with regard to the governor of Wisconsin. Take a look.
I say to Governor Walker and all of the other cowardly Republican governors, if you cannot win or participate in a free and fair election where everybody votes, get out of politics, get a new job.
And you hear a huge applause line. John Nichols, what is he speaking to there?
Well, you know, and I think many of your viewers know, that Wisconsin's been through a 5-year struggle over labor rights. It started in 2011 when Governor Scott Walker implemented a so-called budget repair bill that really savaged union rights in the public sector and made it much harder to organize, to maintain unions. That battle has really gone on since then. Walker and his supporters enacted a right-to-work law, which made it harder for unions to organize in the private sector. So this state has really, in many ways, been ground zero in the fight over trade union rights in this country. And when Bernie Sanders spoke to this crowd in Madison, which is a very pro-union town, after having been introduced by a number of speakers, including the mayor of Madison and the former head of the state AFL-CIO, the crowd was obviously, very excited about that. But I think that's an interesting thing that's going to happen in the next few days in Wisconsin. Hillary Clinton has also been very, very pointed in her criticisms of Governor Walker as well. So you're seeing that Governor Walker while the Republicans, a couple of the Republicans may be vying for his endorsement, on the Democratic side, going after Governor Walker is very, very smart politics.
Right.
Democrats do not like the guy.
Right, and as you're speaking, John, we're looking at live pictures of Bernie Sanders having finished this victory speech, flanked by a Secret Service, but making his way through some of the crowd. You can zoom in there and see it. Again, a boisterous crowd, a crowd that seemed in some parts young and really rowdy and excited. Homemade signs we were talking about earlier that said Wisconsin loves Bernie, Star Wars reference signs that said Bernie, your only hope. And again, we're seeing a really joyful Bernie Sanders here working that crowd and making his way slowly out. John Nichols, stay with us. I want to bring in another voice we haven't heard from yet. Curtis Lee is a political reporter for the Los Angeles Times. Aaron McPike also with us, as well as Joy Reid. Curtis, your thoughts on what we're seeing on what is clearly a great night for Bernie Sanders?
Yeah, it definitely was a great night for Bernie Sanders. One thing, we saw a standard, stump speech that he delivered there in Madison, but it was also peppered with, things where he was talking about momentum. He has momentum. Like, tonight was a great night, and we're looking forward to Wisconsin on the horizon. I mean, it was a battle there in Washington State that he won, but, these aren't winner-take-all states. These are proportional states, and Hillary Clinton will get some delegates out of this and continue her lead over Bernie Sanders. But it was one thing that was very interesting was to really see him, talk about the momentum that he has tonight and this kind of optimistic outlook for the future as his campaign heads into the spring.
Yeah, and Aaron McPike, they are certainly proportional, but if you're going to play a proportional fight, being up in 70% land is a pretty good place to be.
No question. And no question that it was a great day for Bernie Sanders. I actually just got an email from a Clinton source who said, we expected this. This was always going to be his best day of the campaign. It's 3 fairly white caucuses, and that is Sanders' turf. They also point out that of all of the remaining contests left, just 50 delegates are left to award. And then of all the delegates left to award, about half of them are coming from these big states like New York, New Jersey, California, and also Wisconsin. I would say if Bernie Sanders doesn't win Wisconsin, that is going to stem the tide of this momentum that he's gotten today.
Right, and he is down, Joy Reid, 6 points in Wisconsin, but pretty close in a place that John Nichols referenced has plenty of political energy on the Democratic side.
Yeah, absolutely. Wisconsin is interesting. It is not dissimilar in some ways from Iowa, a not too distant state from it, in that the Democratic vote tends to be a quite liberal Democratic vote. It's obviously a state with a labor movement. It's the cradle of the labor union movement, so that makes it sort of a Bernie state. I was just looking up the census quick facts. It's 87.8% white, 6.6% black. That is also a favorable demographic indicator for Bernie Sanders.
Based on the voting we've seen.
Just based on what we've seen so far. Now, that didn't quite work out in all of the states that have voted up to now, but in general, it's a state that's a favorable territory. The other thing that's really important about Wisconsin is that it's an open primary state. And that's really important for Bernie Sanders because he tends to lose the Democratic vote in these states, but he tends to win the independent vote. So in states where independents can weigh in, he tends to do better. So I think Wisconsin becomes a really important state for him because then the next opportunity for a big delegate haul is New York, which has 291 delegates on offer, but it's a much more diverse state and it's a closed primary.
Right, and going back to you briefly, Curtis, I want to say to our viewers out farther west, aloha, because the Hawaii race is now underway, a long way from results, but that is the third state and another caucus where Bernie's expected to do well, Curtis.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll see more results from there tonight, and certainly it is racking up to be a good day for Bernie Sanders. I mean, I've talked to folks on both sides that have said that that they expected this to be one of his best days in the 2016 campaign, and it's certainly shaping up to be that, and we'll have to see what turns out there in Wisconsin or in Hawaii later tonight.
All right, well, we have just come off a big speech by Bernie Sanders, a breaking news speech, as I mentioned. In the middle of it, he pivoted from celebrating that victory in Alaska to announcing the projected victory in Washington State. One more state on the board here that we're watching, Hawaii. As I said, with those caucuses just underway, I want to thank all our guests, John, Curtis, Aaron, and Joy. A big day and a big evening here. We want to tell you all at home about 2 big events coming up this Wednesday on MSNBC.